my presentation is just about Easley Blackwood's microtonal etudes and some of the music theory and my analysis goals and experience with the situation. So, regarding the microtonal etudes, I'm very interested in analyzing them as well as performing them, which is something that Blackwood himself was interested in. For those of you who aren't familiar with the compositions, I can give a little brief overview. The microtonal etudes are 12 movements that Easley Blackwood wrote in was it 1970 something? I don't remember the year, but it was pretty early. And it was a survey of tunings 13 equal through 24 equal. So what I've done with them is I've analyzed 3 of them, and I plan to analyze them all. I'd love to sort of do a lot with them because I think they're really helpful pedagogical pieces. So in my master's thesis, I worked on the 13, the 15, and the 23, and I actually only have half of the movements on my computer, so that's part of the reason why I picked them. I would have liked to have done the 19, but I don't have it. I don't have the music to it. And then during my master's thesis, I also wrote a complementary set of etudes called the macrotonal etudes that use tunings 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 equal, like Blackwood would have used them, theoretically. And I also have chords for the 15 and the 17, spelled kind of how you would find them, not in 12-tone equal temperament, but with triad spellings that we're familiar with, that just use little different arrows here and there. And I'd love to do that with all the etudes, but of course the 23 and the 13 don't lend themselves to having chords that are easily named according to what we know. And then I also have done a keyboard arrangement of the 15 equal etude using my pink keyboard that I rearrange into different Halberstadt formations. So I'd like to do that with all of them. And then I also have accompanied his fanfare in 19-tone equal temperament, a different composition, on guitar. So this is sort of where my experience is. And I also got to visit Easley Blackwood in Chicago. He was sort of he was in assisted living, and we got to talk about music theory and the etudes and sort of what he was thinking. So that was a really powerful experience because it was a good opportunity for me to check and see if I really knew what he was thinking while he was writing the etudes, because that was part of what my analysis was about.
What's the instrumentation, please?
The instrumentation is all electronic instruments. In fact, in the microtonal etudes, the synthesizer that Easley Blackwood was working with was monophonic. So all of these staves are handwritten, and each one is a single line. So during big parts, there's 16 staves to play some simple chords because he can't do polyphony, so he had to play in every part.
And what synthesizer was he using?
The polyfusion synthesizer.
Polyfusion.
Yes, it's a monophonic synth that has the full 88 keys and then a knob to change the generating size. So he had to do that by ear, which is why some of the octaves in the etudes are a bit stretched and shrunk interestingly, which is very nice. It gives it a really realistic character.
So generator, you mean in the tuning deep meaning of the word?
Yeah, it's like what Vito was talking about yesterday, and I know that generator is one of those words that can mean a lot of different things. But generator size, I mean, if you have one interval that you stack over and over to make an equal temperament, that's the size that's being changed with this knob. So if 100 cents was for 12-tone equal temperament, then for 13 it's something like 91. 1200 divided by 13. So, yeah. Anyway, my goal with Easley Blackwood's microtonal etudes is to create an easy harmonic reduction of each one, have a keyboard arrangement of each one, and maybe digitally engrave the scores so that we could see them on a computer and maybe play them back. I think that would be pretty exciting, and Dorico would make that really easy. You could even have different versions with cent deviations, ups and downs, and Easley Blackwood's original accidentals, which aren't really in use today, but still reflect some of the practices that people use when notating equal temperaments of a small size, even if the accidentals are different. His most unusual notations that don't really fit with what we do today are the 21 and the 16. There are mapping inconsistencies in some of them, like those two, and then some of the other ones are identical to things that we do today, like the 15. So, yeah, does anyone have any questions so far? This is a really loose presentation, and I made it really last minute, so if there's anything that's just unclear at all, just feel free to jump in. So, okay, great. So that's what I've done with the Etudes. So now I want to talk about visiting Easley Blackwood. So this is, these are the microtonal Etudes that I wrote, and he signed the copy of them after we had a conversation. And I gather, his health is not in as good of a condition as it once was. But once he was lying down in his bed, we were able to talk about the Etudes and music theory, and he was actually featured on my podcast about microtonality, Now and Zen, where we talked about it because he was really interested in getting more information out. And really, there's a lot more about the music theory that he knows that you can get from his writings on the subject, because he really worked very deeply with each one for a long period of time. It wasn't like he just started the microtonal Etudes on that 13-day grant and then did that and was done with it. He had been working with microtones for years and years with the scalotron, so I think he really got familiar with each of the equal tunings in a very personal way before writing those pieces. And that was, yeah.
Scalotron?
Oh, yes. That's like a little organ. And he talks about it on the podcast. The way he input pitches was to use rows of numbers. And I don't quite remember exactly how he described it, but it sounded very cumbersome, like putting in like every key one at a time by hand. So.
Didn't he say it took like 2 weeks to tune?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said in the podcast, I think, that it took a really long time. So visiting him was really interesting because I was trying to compare some of my theories about like where moments of the music were supposed to lead. Like, for example, there's this moment in the 15 equal etude where there's a descending 240 cent stepwise motion that goes to a major chord that sounds really Zen harmonic and it has a crescendo in it. So I tried to ask him about things like that, and asking him about specific questions was a lot harder. He was more interested in discussing things he perhaps had already said or that he already knew about music theory in a broad sense. So that was the most successful way to have a conversation with him. So, yeah, I definitely want to visit him again, and I think he is also keen on having visitors. If you want to talk about the microtonal etudes, or any of his work in particular, he'd probably be really interested in talking to you, so, especially if you can do something like play a microtonal instrument. Because I think with a 19-tone equal timbre guitar, I sort of won him over. Because I just walked in and played along to his fanfare, like on my YouTube channel, and he was fine with it. Then I tried to play my 15 equal arrangement of his etude on the keyboard, and he insisted that it was incorrect. So I couldn't actually play it for him because he kept interrupting, which was interesting. And I deleted the video, but I had filmed it earlier, and he was humming it along how he thought it was supposed to go, and it was because his perfect pitch was a major second lower. So he was humming it in C minor instead of D down minor, as it's originally in. Yeah, which is pretty interesting. So, yeah, he's just
What do you
fascinating.
think of the microtonal?
He liked some of them, and he didn't like other ones. He really liked the 5, which is the first one, and it's very accessible on purpose. And then he also liked the 10, but he thought it was out of tune, and he liked the 11. So,
Like
50
out of tune as in there's a bug, or out of tune as in 10 just sucks?
I mean, probably like half and half. I don't know. It's very, like, when he was listening to those, it was very hard to coax any kind of commentary out of him. Because he doesn't really expend that kind of energy anymore. So it was more like I was kind of assessing like his general enjoyment of things, and he thought that the rhythms in the 5 were cool, and he talked about that a little bit. And the 11 is just so wild, like on the page. The 5 doesn't look wild at all because it doesn't use any accidentals whatsoever, but the 11 just looks crazy. So, yeah. It's too bad that I don't have I have the microtonal etudes on my computer, but I'm mostly interested in talking about Easley Blackwood's work today. So yeah, I think there was one more thing I was going to say, but maybe I lost it. It'll come back. Okay, so that was just sort of my story of Easley Blackwood's visit. So now we can talk about the things that Easley Blackwood sort of hasn't really finished that perhaps he would like to finish, or that I've heard about from other people. So for one thing, Easley Blackwood has a document called Modes and Chord Progressions in Equal Tunings. I don't remember which journal it was in, but it's a series of writings he has on 15, 16, 17, and 19-tone equal temperament, all of which in his mind produce triads. Interestingly, 16...
That's not the Perspective of New Music, is it?
Yes, I think it is the one, yeah. So he has written that document, and that's available. But from what I gather, he's written about all of the equal tunings in a similar manner that he worked with. So it would be cool if, I was able to visit him again and maybe like sort of figure out a way either to publish that or revise it with his help, something like that. It would be kind of a cool project to get all that finished, because I think the idea is that originally he wanted to have 2 books: the structure of recognizable diatonic tunings, which is already done, and then this with all of the equal tunings, just describing the behavior. It's like a more in-depth version of what you'd see in the liner notes of the Etudes, if that makes any sense. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I'm not really sure where the fanfare in 1980 music is, because his microtonal compositions aren't just the Etudes. We also have that fanfare and then the guitar suite in 15-tone equal temperament. So I'm not quite sure where these things are, but I will be trying to sort of contact the appropriate people, because I think it would also be cool to get those either in the computer or even at least published if they're not published already. From what I gather, he just wrote it down and then gave it to the people, but I can't seem to find them anywhere, so if anybody else... I'm talking about the physical music. Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean he gave it to the people? Who are the people?
Jeffrey Kunst was the guitar player for the guitar suite, and the fanfare was entirely electronic. So he didn't have to give that to anybody. So we definitely know the guitar suite is written down, because Jeffrey Kunst would have had to have read it.
Right.
Or had to have read it. It's funny, those sound the same. But with the fanfare, he, didn't have to give that to anybody. So, I think that's written.
Do you know if he even wrote out a score for that?
I don't know. I hope so. If not, it would be kind of easy to reconstruct one. Probably easier than his Etude, which has more moving parts in it. But the fanfare is more static, so...
It's pretty tonal piece, too.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting how he treats 17 and 19 as quite diatonic, but with modulations that can't normally happen.
Yeah.
Which is something we'll be talking about soon. Okay, so now that we've sort of talked about the Easley Blackwood backstory a little bit, we can dive into the analysis. So, I'll just be talking about a few things from my original paper, and then also talking about the 17 equal Etudes. So, our goal is to talk about the 13, the 15, the 17, and the 23. And there are many others, of course. Okay. So in analysis, I am trying to find certain modes that he's using, which he mentions in the liner notes. Can you see? Okay, cool. And then I'm also trying to relate it to common practice theory, because that's something that Easley Blackwood is really strong in. He always talks about, like when I was visiting him, he talked about a lot of peculiar usages of chords, and he was very eager to talk about things in common practice theory terms. So I think that's how he was viewing a lot of his pieces, through that lens. Of course, seeing what the harmony is doing, which is easier in Etudes that have major and minor triads, or Etudes where he's written explicitly about the tunings or likes them, and of course, looking at his own statements. And again, if you listen to my podcast, there are some things that Easley Blackwood says that are not found in his writings, but that he would have perhaps liked to have written down, such as how he feels about quarter tones. He doesn't like them. Let's see, understanding how intervals map over time. This sort of has to do with regular temperament theory. Like if you have a chord progression in 15-tone equal temperament that's going along, and 12-tone equal temperament that goes along, they might end up in different places because of just the interval arithmetic and how things change subtly over time, or not so subtly, depending on which tuning it is. And then, of course, using Easley Blackwood's notation to understand how he thought of tuning systems that didn't have triads, like 13 and 23, is really important. Looking for moments of intent, like I talked about earlier, and let's see, cataloging salient features indicating function. Mostly, this would be in the 15 equal Etude, where he sort of has an alternative sets of functions that he likes to use in Blackwood 10, which is the mode that he uses in 15 that was named after him. Okay. Blackwood's ternary forms and attitudes toward modulation make the musical material pedagogically helpful. That is, it's not always ABA per se, but it kind of feels like that a lot of times, because in all of these Etudes, except maybe the 19, actually no, the 19 does have it as well, you have 3 chunks of form, and then at either the beginning or the end of each of them, usually the beginning, you'll have a main theme that repeats again. And sometimes it modulates and sometimes it doesn't. In fact, the 17, I think, is the only one that doesn't, which is very interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our first one. We have the 13 notes Etude here. these are the forms according to the measures, and since 13 doesn't have a perfect fifth, our notation is going to be very wild. I haven't compared it to ups and downs yet to see if they're the same, but I gather that Blackwood simply notates things away from C, and then as they get closer and closer to being farther out, he just uses different accidentals as he sees fit. So I also have synthesizers here with intervals. You can see that if we divide the octave 1200 by 13, we get this 92.308, and then we stack 92.308 again, adding it to itself, and we get that, and then that, etc. So that we have 13 individual pitch classes. So does everybody feel comfortable with the idea of 13 tonic-equal temperament? Does that make sense? Okay, good, awesome. So then, this is the form, and let me just play the etude for you a little bit. I love that picture, by the way. 13 is the sostenuto right there. Yeah.
Do you have the score too?
Yeah, we could actually look at that. Although it kind of disrupts the PowerPoint. I probably should have just pasted it in here, but thanks. So right now we're in that first part. And now there's sort of this bass register that's going on, and the chords get more complicated. So the A section is that lone theme of like rising minor thirds. So now we're in this section. Yeah, second section here, I can't talk. But yeah. And when you hear that, that's like the magic horn part that's notated in the score. And that sort of signals that we're getting ready for B here. So now we're sort of in a different key area. And these keys sort of represent the roots of where we are. And the modes used, even though they're unclear. This is 2/13 lower than that, but it changes a little bit so that it is identical to this last chunk of B when I get back to A. Lone minor thirds again, so that's our A, and then that's our very last part. So you can hear how in the 13 tone-equal tempered etude, Blackwood doesn't use perfect fifths as any kind of stable sonority. But when he introduces them, they're either contrapuntally sort of glancing against each other so that we don't hear the dissonance, like in the A sections, or in the B sections where we have chromatic chords. Almost all the chords found in the B section have 4 or more notes, usually 5, and it's highly chromatic, and it's almost like in little sections of about 2 bars, you have usages of 1 or 2 different modes. The Father 8 mode in regular temperament theory, which uses 5 large steps and 3 small steps, as opposed to 2 from the diatonic scale. And a mod mas of that, which is sort of like an alteration where we scoot one of the steps over. So I don't remember which one exactly it is. For those of you that aren't familiar with a MOS scale or an MOS scale, it just has to do with what order the steps are in. So a 5L3S moment of symmetry scale or MOS scale will have, oh man, I hope I know this off the top of my head, 2 L's, an S, 2 L's, an S, and then an L and an S. But then this other version bunches 3 of the L's together in adjacently, if that makes any sense. So there are basically 3 whole steps in a row in this scale, but in this scale that doesn't happen, even though they're using the same interval sizes of 1 and 2.
So just to state that differently, you're trying to evenly distribute the large steps amongst the small steps.
Exactly. It's almost like if you want to make a scale with transpositional symmetry, but things don't divide into each other in set theory language. But yeah, I know I can't. I'm trying to explain that faster, but I don't think I can because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So the 13-note etude is pretty fascinating. This is the mode that Easley Blackwood is using, and you know, he refers to all of them candidly in his liner notes and in his other works. So we already have some information about what he is using because he sort of tells us himself. So his term for it right here, a strange mode best described as sub-minor, is his name for what we now call Father 8 in regular temperament theory. So these are simply the letter names that he used and how he was thinking of them. So those opening thirds, just, you know, A flat, C double flat, and then B flat, D double flat. You can see that if we go around the circle here in chunks, that we more often than not end up with things that are 3 notes apart on the clock face. Now this C double flat to E double flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, is actually 4 apart, but most of them are 3. So this scale actually has a lot more minor thirds in it than the diatonic scale, but of course, no perfect fifths at all. So really in the first part, we hear these ascending minor thirds that are presented very plainly, like this. And this is sort of like one line. And now there's another line. And now the 2 lines are contrasting as the magic horn comes in. So that's sort of the structure of the first part and how
Were you playing with the magic what?
The magic horn. It's like that little instrument that kind of sounds like an oboe. Yeah. I'm using Easley Blackwood's name because in the score he writes how he wants the instrument to sound. And sometimes he'll write an actual instrument, and sometimes he'll just write an attribute, which is something I try to do in my own scores as well. So yeah, that's the mode that he's using. And then in my analysis, we don't have to go over this a lot, but this is just the kind of stuff that I talked about in my paper. And this is actually what I just showed you, is that there's this first line, and then a second line comes in ascending minor thirds, and then there's sort of this gradual descent and call and response between voices. That's another textual device that Blackwood uses in almost all of the etudes, is call and response to kind of like get things moving in any particular mode, especially if it's not diatonic. So yeah, the 23 is the most unusual in that respect because it's not as cookie cutter, you know? Because if you have call and response, you've usually got like a chunk, and then there's another chunk that's responding, chunk, chunk, chunk. But in the 23, it's like this smear, which is really different. So yeah, I also was really interested in a particular section in the 13 that has this very bizarre resolution that I couldn't quite explain, because it seems like in the bass line, we are almost moving by perfect fourths. Let me go back to our intervals for a second. So in 13-tone equal temperament, our interval from 0 to 5 is 461.538 cents, which is not quite exactly a perfect fourth, and probably wouldn't sound like that if played in isolation, but maybe in a bouncing bass line, going like from 0 to 5, we might hear it as something like that. And that is actually how our modulation happens, strangely enough. Because when he modulates to his middle section in the etudes, he usually goes a fourth or a fifth away, or something like you would do in classical music where you have like 1, 5, 1, like in sonata allegro form. This makes sense if you've like, you know, taken music theory and all that stuff. But here, he sort of modulates a fourth away, but if I recall correctly, it's the lower fourth. So let's count from A flat to D double flat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He could have done the bigger one, since we have 2 choices of perfect fourth size. There's also a 0 to 6 interval that's 553.8 cents. that's close. But he chose the smaller one, which is interesting because he uses the larger one to represent a fourth most times in the Father 8 scale. So yeah. Okay, and then I don't really have time to explain a lot of this section, but I can play the part here and sort of show you where I think the resolution is and see if you agree. I tried to ask Blackwood about this, but of course since it's 13, it's very difficult to talk about this intelligently, even if you're like aware of everything. So let's start from right here. No, that's too late. Okay, let's try from right here. And then my hope is that we can start our B section in that first little chunk. Okay, we're almost there. Yeah, there it is. No. Now that chord sounds resolved to me. Does it sound resolved to anybody else?
It sounds like a landing point of unresolution.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a landing point, and there's like 4 different.
It doesn't sound resolved, I wouldn't say.
Right? Yeah, I have it listed as that, but
for me, it sounded like we have more perfect intervals.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, it wasn't like a tonal resolution or closure.
Right.
It sounded
but
like
it was
the beginning.
mostly like having open intervals.
Yeah.
And so could you tell us where it happens again?
Yes.
In this score?
Yes, absolutely. It happens, if we were thinking about our forms here, we get done with Form A, and then in Form B, we have that big resolution sort of like 2/3 of the way through, and then there's kind of the end, and we go back into this A thing again. So let's do that again, shall we? Da, da, da. There it is. So there's 2 magic horns. There it is. Back to A. So yeah, that modulation is very, very unusual in my mind, and part of the way I was explaining this resolution is via the melodic content. You see how the contour stops doing a call and response exactly and kind of tapers off, and then it continues to do that. So there's that figure that we have. We also have more tension in these 5-note chords leading up to this one. And we have movement in the bass line that sort of suggests a dominant tonic movement. And then later, right after that, we sort of have that same movement, and it doesn't sound quite like 2/5, but it's like that movement by fourths, since it's a little bit uncharacteristic of what he's been doing in the bass line generally, maybe pops out more as a resolved chord. So, yeah, I think that's about all I can say about that with the time that I have. So, are there any more questions about the 13? Yes.
Did Avery have any intentions to orchestrate these?
He would like other instruments and groups to play them.
Okay.
So I think that was something he maybe wanted to do but felt like was out of his reach. So, yeah. Definitely. He mentioned that to me, and in the score as well, was like, if other people want to play them, they could play along like part by part, monophonic instruments, things like that. So, yeah. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and move on to the 15 notes, which will make a little bit more sense because of major and minor triads. So, the logic that Blackwood used in notating 15 tone equal temperament is just something I call Blackwood notation right now, but it has to do with a closed circle of fifths in 5-tone equal temperament. So, let's look at our closest perfect fifth approximation. If we're starting here on C, and then we go to G, 720 cents. That's our closest perfect fifth, which sounds quite sharp, but still a perfect fifth for sure. So if we keep stacking 720 cents, C, G, D, A, E, then once we get to E, we are actually 480 cents away from C, which is more like a perfect fourth than a major third, as you would think. This means that in 15, we can count E and F as the same thing. So anything that's notated as just a vanilla minor second in 15 is enharmonic. So like E and F are enharmonic, A and B flat are enharmonic. It's not shown here, but D and E flat would be enharmonic, etc. So then, since all the accidentals you know from 12 are in that 5-tone equal tempered circle of fifths, for the other two chains, you just add arrows. So that's what he did. And people have added different arrows in the past, and in the future, I guess. So yeah. And then the form of the 15 notes is definitely still ternary, but it's a lot looser than most of his other etudes because he sort of arrives, he doesn't arrive in the same way each theme every time, unlike in the 13 or the 23 or even the 17. He sort of arrives in a, well, hold on, he should arrive in, I think, a minor key here and then a major key here. So let's go ahead and, oh, and of course the mode that he's using is Blackwood 10 for most of the time, especially in this beginning part. And somewhat at the ending. I say chromatic here, but really I should have said he uses Blackwood 10 in the minor mode and then switches to the major mode of Blackwood 10. So here is that mode that he was using in letters, and as he describes it, the 10-note symmetric mode. So D down is the note that he's starting on, so that is 2 out of 15 notes up from C. So now let's take a look at this 15 here. This 15 is great, it's my favorite. This is also the one I arranged for keyboard.
almost sad.
Very sad.
Ray
Fantastic
Williams
piece.
missed the 15 EDO memo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to hear an orchestra play that someday, like before I die.
Ooh.
So yeah, that's the form of the 15. Now it should be noted when he's using progressions with major and minor chords that work sort of together, that he usually is actually using Blackwood 10. It's those transitional moments where he doesn't really use it as much. Like when he's moving from the minor, F down minor to F up major, and things like that. I'm wondering if that F down is actually wrong and it should be F up. Maybe. Okay. I'll fix that later if it's wrong. Well, those are my papers, so it's probably not wrong, I hope. But yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of the mode that Blackwood 10 is. You can see that we have a small step, a large step, a small step, and we just keep alternating so that it's this nice little five-way symmetrical shape. Like we could take this and we could go and we could rotate it like 3 and then put it back in and it would still be on the same dots. So that's what it means to be transpositionally symmetrical in set theory. So the way he's using this like a minor mode is, well, you can see that our minor triad is here, D down, F, A down. And then in Blackwood 10, if we continue spelling triads, so if I move to the next one, E flat, G down, B flat, that is a major chord in Blackwood 10. So it's kind of spelled like it would be in just intonation, where the minor third in a minor triad gets an up arrow, and a major triad gets a down arrow. So you would spell, you know, if this is D down, F, A down, you can also kind of think of it like being one arrow down from D, F up, A, which would be a different minor triad. It actually would be the same as this one. So, but yeah, okay, so if you have that minor chord and then that major chord, it repeats all along here. So you also have E down minor, E down, G, B down, and then F major, F, A down, C, G down minor, or F sharp down minor. He actually uses both spellings in the etude, which is interesting. G down, B flat, D down, and then we also have G major, G, B down, D, etc. And then we have all those chords. So in Blackwood 10 we have things that kind of look like a 5 and look like a 4, so you can almost use chords related by fifth as you would in the common practice period. Blackwood was just careful not to include certain relationships that didn't exist, like 2-5-1. He bans that in his 15-tone equal-tempered work explicitly in his own writings. So, or like, you know, one chord, if we have D down minor, we can also have G down minor and A down minor. So that's sort of what he's using there. So 5 equally distributed minor chords, 5 equally distributed major chords that are just ticked off a little bit. So, yes.
You said while the recording was playing that there was a Zen moment.
Yes.
What makes a moment Zen versus that entire piece being considered Zen?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
I would consider the entire piece as Zen, but there are certain maneuvers that are more Zen than others. And there's a moment in the score where he sort of writes something in that makes me think that he wanted that moment to be peculiar in a certain way. But it's also in the middle of a section where he's using 5 major chords equally around the octave, like in a major mode of the Blackwood 10 scale. One more thing I should explain is that if we consider this top note to be our starting note, and we sort of start here and build triads, our very first triad is going to be minor. So you can imagine we can also scoot this over 1, take the whole thing, scoot it over 1 dot, and then our first triad would be major. We would have 2 steps to the next one, and then 1 step, 2, 1. And so that is just called our major mode of Blackwood 10. So this is the minor mode that he mostly uses, and he also uses the major mode too in different keys. So, yeah. And then here's a harmonic reduction of how all of the chords operate in the tuning. You can see that in our approach to F up, we actually use all of the chords from that Blackwood scale, except the B flat up is not, doesn't jive with that, so you can consider this all a Blackwood 10 scale right here. And then these are chromatic chords, and he's sort of mixing his old key with his new key, if that makes sense. If D down minor is featured down there, he's kind of putting it here so that we hear it again. And then these are also chords that are in a major mode of Blackwood 10. So you can see that these form a chain of fifths, right? F, B flat, E flat, and then the other way, C and G. So all of these major chords here are from a major mode of Blackwood 10, and these are from the respective minor mode. So it looks like my thing back there is definitely wrong, and it's F up minor, but that's okay.
To make sure I understand what you're saying,
yes.
so the Zen moment refers to a moment when he steps further away from analogs of 12 theory and into something that...
Sort of. That's part of it. So let's talk about that. But this is just like, if you wanted to listen to the etude and hear what the chords were, this is like a lead sheet to the piece, basically. And so I have that for 17 too. But yeah. Okay. Then I also talk about how Blackwood 10 lands a semitone higher than it would in 12-tone equal temperament, and I've got a whole YouTube video about it, so I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I will just mention that this little thing right here was something cool I came up with, which might be a good idea for analyzing Zen harmonic progressions in the future, if y'all are interested in doing that, is comparing where things land in other tunings. So like, in each individual voice, I use some voice leading, good voice leading, and analyze how each voice landed differently on a new note. For example, I say here, like, in the alto, which I guess is A here, no, sorry, C. This is our 12-tone version, and here's our 15-tone version spelled two different ways. If our alto is on A, it goes down a minor second, well, sort of, because we talked about 15 and it being enharmonically weird. So it goes down 1 out of 15 notes, is what I should have said there. And then a small major second, and then another 1 out of 15. So basically, if it's going down 4 notes, that's the same as going down a minor third, which isn't right. Hold on, small 1 plus 2 plus 1, going down a minor third. In 12, this puts us down a major third. Oh, yes, that is right. I'm getting mixed up. Yes, a minor third in 15 is 4 steps. C going to E flat up. Just checking. So, yes, that would be right. But anyway, that's all there, and that's all good. So this is sort of the Zen harmonic moment I'm referring to, because Blackwood himself talks about planing in 5 equal and how it creates a really bizarre sensation to the ear. And then at this moment right here, it's what happens in the harmonic reduction is it's right here. It's this moment where he gets to F up major, and then he planes down to E flat up major, but he doesn't do it in a way that preserves voice leading. Everything just shifts down, like in this example, and then he also notates like a sempre crescendo here. So that makes me think that he intentionally is making this gesture more Zen harmonic. And we also have a descending 240 cent interval, which is a really Zen harmonic descending interval. In ear training, descending intervals are sort of harder than ascending ones, which means that if you use a descending interval that's very unfamiliar when you're not expecting it, it's really going to shock you. So that's this part right here, and let me try and find it. I think I can. Come on. Pass. Okay, good. Would you prefer this or the harmonic reduction? This, okay. Now we're in the midst of that. So, yeah, very, very interesting moment, right? And I think it's definitely intentionally Zen harmonic. Maybe I'll get to talk to him about that next time I see him. Or if one of you visits him, you can talk to him about this too, because I'm sure he thought a lot about it. So, yeah, there's something else I was going to say that was important, and I don't remember what it is, but that's okay. Does anyone have any questions about the 15? Nobody. Okay. Cool. All right. Man, I think this thing I was going to say was really important, but I don't know where it went. I didn't sleep very well, so probably my fault. But yeah. Oh, yes, I remember. Okay, and this is pretty important. I talk about it in my videos a little bit. Another reason this sounds so Zen is because of the contrast in how this is used, how the 240 cent step is used. So the idea is that in Blackwood 10, you almost have a little diatonic scale in it. D, like D down, E down, F, G down, A down, B B flat, C, D down, or something like that. So if you use the 240 cent step size, which is 3 out of 15 notes in 15 tone equal temperament, that can sound like a major second if you disguise it properly. And it's like, in this one part right here, he breaks with that behavior. So that's another reason why we could say that this was Zen harmonic, because he's not using the 240 cent step as a passing major second to a third that disguises the size of that. Because 15 tone equal temperament doesn't have a proper major second. It has an 160 cent interval and a 240 cent interval. So usually he picks the 240 to act like a major second in a diatonic scale as a subset of Blackwood 10. Not really a diatonic scale, but it sounds like one. But yeah. Okay, cool. Now let's talk about the 17. I don't really want to talk about this one too much because I don't think I have very much time. Do I go until 10:30? Where'd Chris go?
It's a library.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Well,
I'll check the schedule.
I think I can probably...
Yeah, 10:30 continue smart.
And we started late, so take every minute.
Okay, cool. I'll just be good about it. Okay, great. So in 17 tone equal temperament, we actually can notate things diatonically. So we have a scale of ascending perfect fifths: C, G, D, A, E, B. Where's F sharp? There it is. F sharp. And then we could keep going. I guess a fifth in 17 is 10, so 19, 2. C sharp, there's that. And then G sharp, etc. So there are also half sharps and half flats that one could use in 17 to fill in the gaps. You see how we have C, then D flat, and then C sharps? They're kind of backwards. So to fix that, a lot of people have been using the enharmonic C half sharp on this pitch 1 here, and then D half flat here. So like C sharp and D flat are enharmonic, and then C half sharp and D flat are enharmonic. I probably said that wrong, but yeah. Anyway, that's sort of the idea. And in 17 tone equal temperament, since our fifths are sharp, 705.88 cents, it causes our major thirds to be very sharp and our minor thirds to be very flat. But the minor third generally sounds less unpleasant. So Blackwood's strategy to deal with this is to use tetrads. Maybe he wouldn't call them that, actually. He calls them minor seventh chords. So basically using chords with 4 notes in them that are extended harmony disguises like the whole sourness of the thing. And then in the 17 note we have some forms here, A prime, and B, just because we have a similar modulation scheme here, and he's using modes instead of tonality per se. Although in the B section, he does have what's known as the enormous oboe solo, where he uses melodic minor. And he travels in such a way that can't be done in 12 tone equal temperament, which is sort of the basis of this whole thing. C minor to D sharp minor to G minor. I think D sharp should divide C and G in half here. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something that can't be done in 12 tone equal temperament. So, let's try, well of course here's the diatonic scale, and this is the main one that he uses in the main theme, the and it's Dorian. So what he says about it is he explicitly mentions Dorian, Phrygian, and Aeolian modes. Etude consists largely of passages in these modes connected by chromatic modulations. He needs a 17 note tuning, which is definitely kind of his thing. Now, I also have a harmonic reduction here with all the chords. Most of them are just extended harmonies of things you would find in modes. There are a few unusual chords where I had to come up with interesting names. So, this D sharp asterisk 7, I don't really have a name for that, F sharp asterisk 7, that's a chord that is spelled like this. F sharp A, C, F flat. That's how Easley Blackwood spells it. And then the D sharp one would be spelled D sharp, F sharp, A, D flat, I hope. So those are those there. And then with this little half sharp thing, there's just a very bizarre chromatic passing chord that uses a perfect fourth, well, one 17-tone size smaller than a perfect fourth, and then a half, not really a half flat on the sixth, but it could be enharmonically notated as such. So don't worry about those because they're really passing chords, and this is just the whole structure. What I really want to do is, if we have a circle of fifths here, what I'm going to do is listen to the song and then show you the modulations. We could even do it twice. We could do it with this one, which shows you the modulations in passing, and then on the second one, the modulations stay there so you can see the whole path. So let's go ahead and try it with the first one. Also, here's how a circle of fifths works. See how we have major on the outside like normal? That's going to be Ionian. Our inner ring is going to be Dorian, and then right above those major notes on the very outside, those are going to be Aeolian. And then there's only one use of Phrygian, so it will just briefly appear for that moment. So, alright, let's take a look. So we're in G Dorian, this is our nice little theme, opening theme. Jump modulation. And he just calls them jumps. And you'll hear that B soon. There it is. And we're back. There's that brief one. And we're back. Here's our melodic minor. So not modal anymore, briefly. And now you'll see it jump here. Defining that perfect fifth and a half. Hear the theme a little bit. This part is weird. There it is. Okay. Great, so hopefully you heard the minor sevenths in that, as well as, like, sort of the way he uses things modally is that he sort of has kind of two behaviors. One behavior is that if he has a minor seventh chord, he'll sort of transpose it up a major second, like G minor 7, A minor 7, and then maybe put a funky note in the bass for the A minor 7, like a G, in fact, this is a pedal point. So pedal points are very important in the use of the 17-note etude because they sort of signal how the modulations will happen and retain sort of the memories of previous keys. We kind of have this pattern that repeats in the first two forms where we have a G Dorian, and then we go to some unrelated keys where you have the minor and then the relative major travel back to A flat Dorian and then back to G Dorian. So he's using the fact that G sharp and A flat are different to make the difference between C sharp Ionian and A flat Dorian matter. And the same is also true with the B Ionian and A flat Dorian. So, yeah. Now, if you like, we can look at this pattern where all the circles will stay so we can see all the keys that he's been at. If that sounds fun. Sounds good. Okay, cool. I'll take that as a yes. There we go. So there is our journey around the circle of fifths, and you can see that only 5 keys weren't used, or 5 key signatures weren't used. By the way, when he notates D sharp melodic minor, he does write in double sharps, and then there's another one that's odd that I'm trying to remember. Okay, this one, C sharp. I guess I thought he used one that would normally have a double sharp in the key signature, but I think he intentionally avoided that, as you can see, because then he would have to write some things that he maybe didn't want to write. So, there you go. That's the journey. So I think that's all I have to say about the 17. Yes?
Could you reiterate what your 3 layers around the circle of fifths are, and then
Yes.
also the extraneous C sharp and what the purpose of that is?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. So basically, the big letters on the outside are major, so that's just Ionian, and then the small letter out here, that's sort of out, is Aeolian. So that's kind of like the circle of fifths you would normally see. And then on this inner ring is Dorian. So you can see that, like, if D major is here, then E Dorian has 2 sharps. So G Dorian is where the main key of the thing is. And then with this C sharp here, it was the only use of the Phrygian mode. So I just decided to pop it up there, because that's the key signature we used. I didn't feel like it was worth it to make a whole ring of Phrygian just to add C sharp.
Okay.
At least I didn't think it was worth it. So, but yeah. Okay, cool. All right. And now let's briefly talk about the 23. This will be that last one. So 23 is very interesting because since it's also a prime number, it doesn't have anything in common with any of the tunings before it in terms of intervals. And it also doesn't have perfect fifths that are close to pure, which Easley Blackwood doesn't like to use impure fifths. But 23-note etude is very interesting because he uses both approximations of the perfect fifth as fifth-like things. So let's take a listen to it before we talk about this stuff, and then things will make more sense, because this is definitely one of those that's kind of, it's really hard to get a feel for where it's going. There's perfect fifths in the bass. kind of fades out. I have this weird hunch that maybe he didn't really want to commit to a tonic note on that last part. And maybe that's why he didn't do it. But yeah, the sense of tonality in the 23 is definitely very weird. So what we have here is we have Pelog and Slendro modes, which Blackwood himself mentions, by interval size in his interview. So it's definitely unambiguous. And then we also have slightly differing usages of these. So generally in Pelog and Slendro, from what I know about it, Pelog has a set of 7 notes and Slendro has 5. So Slendro is like sort of like 5-tone equal temperament, but slightly unequal in some cases. And then Pelog tends to vary more and is also highly unequal in a different way. It's sort of like the anti-diatonic scale or Mavilla 7 and regular temperament theory. And then these 2 notes here are used as auxiliary tones. So the way that Easley Blackwood uses the harmony in the 23-note etude is if he has a Pelog or Slendro mode, he is using that sort of in the top register. You can see that in the opening we have similar contours of the same scale and rhythmic augmentation, sort of in this same contour, but the contours are moving at different times. That's kind of one layer. And then we also have a melodic layer of exotic voices and an ostinato of 2 different kinds of perfect fifths. And the 2 different kinds of perfect fifths show up as different auxiliary tones. So the auxiliary tones here in Pelog are sort of part of that scale. But then what he also does is later, when he uses Slendro scales, he puts in different auxiliary tones for the Slendro scales. And I don't know where the 2 notes are. I think they're probably in between the larger steps, like here and here, for those perfect fifths in this layer when he uses the Slendro scales. Sometimes. And sometimes he takes notes from the scale itself. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't remember which one, but why did you say it was the opposite of the diatonic scale?
Oh, because
Mavilla 7.
Mavilla 7 is sometimes called that because the step sizes actually flip around. Instead of having 5 whole steps and 2 half steps, I say whole and half, but I should say large and small. Y'all don't care what I say, right? But yeah, instead we have 2 large steps and 5 small steps. So it's like a reversal of what it usually is, which results in a very, very Zen harmonic scale. So yeah, that's basically sort of how the 23 opens, and then with these exotic voices, they continue with the melody because they stick out so much from the main parts of just moving melody with no clear definition that has a similar contour. I also have some moments where I analyze the usage of common tones because the Pelog and Slendro scales that Blackwood picks have a lot of common tones between them, and in fact Slendro in particular in this tuning, since it's near 5-tone equal temperament, you can just take 1 note and move it over and get a different Slendro scale. So sometimes he does that for microtonal voice leading in the chromatic sections right here. So let me listen to this again, and this time I'll point to the parts of the form that we're in. In fact, this is here. These almost sound like major 7s to me, I don't know why. So anyway, that goes on. And we're in this part, D down Pelog. And listen to that little change in mode. That's our F Slendro. So he just jumps to it from there. And here's a specific textural thing where he has 1 bar of a different scale, and then another bar of the next scale. He also does that a lot. Same melody as before. And then you hear sort of more notes in the bass and a different overall character. That's this chromatic section that's building. B-flat Slender now. So that modulation is kind of interesting because I think that maybe he was thinking in terms of D down and B flat almost being a fifth apart from each other. In fact, hold on, let's see, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 15, 16. Okay, so then a perfect fifth is 13. So not quite a fifth away. But yeah, there's a lot of the slender scales that are close. So it's sort of hard to get the difference between the slender and the Pelog modes. But honestly, in the Pelog modes, there's a little bit of a diminished chord flavor to some of the melodic movement that sounds really weird, and almost like our senses of function are mixing up with like what a Pelog scale is supposed to be naturally. So this one is very, very interesting, and it was very hard to analyze in my paper too. You also can see that in like the chromatic section, I have all these moments where I've figured out what all the pitches are and the common tones here. And some bars even have elisions of different slender scales. So like I'm just calling that a double slender right there. Microtonal voice leading in between the voices and stuff like that. So yeah, that's basically it. So does anyone have any questions about this whole thing? I know it was just a lot of theory at one time, so I tried to not make it boring, but yeah.
Tom?
Just with the title Etudes, and this might be in the liner notes, is he trying to conquer a specific technical problem with each of these, or do you take that into account with your analysis, or do you say that your Zen moment could be what that etude is about?
Yeah, his stated goal is to find coherent progressions, modes, tuning systems, and functions in each of the equal tunings from 13 to 24. So his goal was to probably find the most like harmonically and melodically meaningful thing to him that like the ear can latch onto. So.
In that particular tuning, or?
In all of them.
In all of them. I just think for each one, whenever I think about etudes, I think it's always conquering like a technical problem.
Yeah. I suppose for him, conquering that problem means like conquering the hurdle of writing in equal tunings in an accessible way, because he also came up with all of the notations himself. And I think some other people were coming up with notations for equal temperaments independently of him, but perhaps not all of those in a row. So, yeah. Tom, do you have a question?
I was going to just briefly ask about the even number etudes. Just, you've obviously focused analysis on these ones, but in broad strokes, like, what are those like? What was he doing?
In the other ones.
Picking around in the evens.
Yeah. In the evens. You mean like even numbers?
Yeah.
Of...
The 8s, the 10s, the 14s, what was he picking around for?
Oh, I guess I'm confused because I don't know what you mean by evens.
The even equal temperaments. Because obviously, you covered some odds. You did a lot of odds today. What are the evens like? Just
Oh, okay, I see. I left out some evens. Yeah, he's, well, it depends on whichever mode he thinks is closest to something you would find in 12-tone equal temperament, and he picks that. And if that can't be done, then he picks a simple mode. Like, in 23, he picked 2 simple modes, and in 13, he picked 5 or 8. The 14, he doesn't like 14 at all, so he uses complex chords and fast-changing meters.
Required him to write ones.
Right,
He buried it.
Exactly. Interestingly, he mentions that the 14-note tuning is too out of tune to end on a single note, so I guess 21-tone equal temperaments thirds resolved that for him. But yeah, the 14 is chaotic. The 16 is slow. It's not as slow as the 15, but it uses minor 7th chords similarly to the 15 to disguise the dissonance of the fifths, which in 16, of course, are much flatter than in 15.
Sorry, what do you mean slow?
Slow in tempo.
Oh, the piece is slow, not the... Okay. I thought you meant 16 EDO was slow. In some, like, harmonic sense. I was like,
Oh, yeah. And then the 18 is similarly chaotic like the 14. I think you can tell, and this is something that I focused on in my paper too, which is that like with etudes where he finds that things are out of tune, he makes things more chaotic, like metrically, more dissonant, adds more notes to chords, things like that. It's almost like the tempo and the character of those pieces are associated with how dissonant he thinks he is in general, or he thinks the tuning is in general. And then he finds the 20 to be out of tune, but uses a minor 6th chord. The 22 uses triads, although, and it's very homophonic, I haven't really looked at that, and then the 24 is like a 5-part canon. So, quarter
tones. It's
tones.
almost as if you get more of the etude sense of talking about the evens in that, like, he seemed determined to go into each of these and pull out something as analogous or that could use the toolkit of Western music theory.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
even the ones that it's really hard to do it in, that seems to be what he rushed in to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think if there's no more questions, then that's it. Thanks, everybody.